Hello. I would never, ever actually dream of making you guys sit through an X lessons from Y talk, so we're not really going to do that. But in honor of what I actually was going to talk about, I gotta give props to one of my favorite character actors of all time. And you know, 2 out of 3 adjectives isn't bad. I don't think Peter Dinklage is shallow. I wanted to talk a little bit about what we've learned, as Jesse had said in the intro, over the last few years in our work at Stimulant. We have found that the more digital touch points there are in our lives, we're reaching saturation really quickly. And I think that there is a very pronounced need to really start thinking about having achieving greater success through having more frequent touch points, allowing that ecosystem of experiences to infiltrate the fabric of our lives, but to have each of those touch points be much shorter and hopefully much sweeter. And a lot of this knowledge has come to us from doing things in public spaces where they're noisy and chaotic, like the Consumer Electronics Show, where people have just the attention span of gnats because they're saturated with information and experience and media all day long, all the way to the home. Talk about an actually fairly distracting environment in terms of a lot of tasks needing to be completed and a lot of things fighting for your attention. So one of the things that we've really started to kind of frame in how we think about user experience at Stimulant is that the most precious thing anyone can give us is their time and their attention. And by framing it in this way, we feel a lot of responsibility to not squander that investment. You know, what's the return on attention for a user? And I think this is an important principle to keep in mind because the very nature of what constitutes a computing device is changing under our feet every single day. And you know, what happened to the whole 1990s, 2000s thing of convergence? We're in this era where all these factors are starting to combine and really diversify computing platforms. Sensors are everywhere. Objects are now intelligent. And so, and in a lot of our work, spaces can now sense and sometimes even think. So as this field of possibilities broadens, I think we can all imagine that, you know, we could be in a lovely utopian world where magical gnomes are doing all of our work, and that's great. But at the same time, if we're not careful, we could easily be in a dystopia of devices that are like my family. They're needy, they're codependent, and they're just clamoring for attention all the time. And I think all of us can figure out where on that spectrum we'd probably prefer to fall. And in terms of trying to look at all these digital touch points in our lives and the interactions we have with machines and how technology can facilitate interactions from human to human, and thinking about how these can be a little bit lighter weight, but still deliver tons of meaning and tons of value, those kinds of interaction patterns we have started to call casual. And I think that it's really important for these touch points to be low impact and deliver a huge amount of value relative to how much input a user gives into a system. Is going to be incredibly important for adoption for any new technology. I think one of the most interesting lightweight, really casual technologies is actually the light switch. So if you think about a completely dark room, how much visual information is conveyed when you turn on the light? And when we turn on the light, is our primary goal asking for there to be light? No, we're actually asking for there to be light so that we can accomplish something else in that otherwise dark room. And even how these things are placed in our rooms in our daily lives, like how many of us can just walk into a room and just we know, put out the right hand and feel up and down, and we're probably going to find that light switch. I think it's a really powerful example. In terms of these casual interactions and casual interactions both between people and between computers, there's been a lot of research on this dating back to the this is from the 1990s, just a simple study of people walking through a corridor lined with glass offices. And it's really interesting to see people kind of walk by, oh, there's Fred, I forgot that I need to ask Fred something. And so they backtrack. They have these really organic, lightweight, fast conversations. And so people have spent many years analyzing, of course, in architecture, how these spaces influence interactions. More specific to the information space, there's been a bunch of academic research in this field as well. This is a really good paper from 2007 that talks about how information, people, and relevant to what we do, place, really influence one another and how information is gathered and information is exchanged. And so we're a services company. We do these things for other people. But I think this has a lot of other, a lot of relevance as well for people who design products and services. So you have to make very conscious decisions when you make a product or service, or just a project, about where we're going to fall on that spectrum between ambient and focused usage. And again, I think that one of the promises of casual interactions is increasing the frequency of interaction with a product or service, but having each one of those interactions be a little bit quieter, a little bit more in passing, and it's the value that's constantly delivered back from all of those frequent interactions where people really get meaning and relevance. So we've started to kind of call this whole paradigm in our shop casual computing, and it's important to remember that we don't think of casual as meaning kind of down market or pedestrian or cheap. The more casual something is, the more someone will be less self-conscious about using it, which is especially important as we get into wearables and non-traditional mobile devices that are used in public spaces where others can see you use it. The less investment and time and attention it will take for someone to actually have a meaningful engagement with it. And the more comfortable someone the more comfortable someone will be likely in using it. So we've found that a lot of the patterns of doing this kind of work has kind of boiled down into 3 principles for us. The first one is perhaps obvious: keep it short. Be concise as possible, but without compromising the value or impact that you might be delivering. When we do work in museums, when we do work in a corporate lobby or a visitor center, we are acutely aware that when people interact with our piece, it's often completely serendipitous. They don't know it's there before they get there. Or if they do, they've never used it before. They've never seen it before. So they have some other longer-term, short-term goal that we need to make sure that we can add value to and not distract from unnecessarily. Of course, the more open-ended a digital experience is, you can build in rewards. So if someone is going to be using it and they use it for 5 seconds, that should be really impactful, really meaningful. If they choose to use it for 10 seconds, you should really reward even 2x that very, very short duration. So it's all about having people expend the least amount of effort to engage with something and then deliver really emotionally or intellectually stunning results. We also like to keep things shallow, meaning kind of going away from deeper, more longer duration experiences, not having people traverse a big, deep, IA structure to get meaningful data. And for us, this also helps people keep moving through a space. A lot of work that we do is our digital installations where there's already been all this other investment in architecture or training booth staff to deliver a certain narrative. And by kind of doing our thing and getting out of the way, we really leverage all those other investments that our clients have already made. And finally, keep it sexy. Just because an experience is simple to use and only takes a moment doesn't mean that in any way it should be shortchanged in the details of its design or its technical execution. There's a guy named Daniel Wigdor who used to work at Microsoft, and I think now he's at the University of Washington. He had a great term for this, and he calls it performance aesthetics. And the idea behind this concept is that the more high performance, the more reactive, the more responsive, the more fluid the user experience is in terms of the kind of geeky hardware and software execution, the more emotionally invested someone will be in that experience. It really helps convey that sense of quality. So in this way, we think that it's very natural to have really casual experiences be married with ultra-premium sensibilities. So in short, it's really about asking for just a little bit of input from your end users and just delivering a ton, way out of scale or way out of proportion with just that little thing that they gave you in terms of their attention and their input. As I said, we've done some work for CES, and one project that we learned a lot from in this regard was building the digital component for Intel's booth at CES in 2012. And so what we did is we built this rear projection system, and it was literally an ecosystem of creatures. There were these input stations, and what you do is you would put something in a sensing field. They looked like touch screens, but they were actually volumetric. And so whatever you put in this area would be imaged. We would basically build a 3D mesh out of it, and then we'd lay that around a central axis and create an aquatic creature. When the creature was created, it would have behavior. So some were predators, some were prey, some would kind of find each other, dance together, and then spin off. And it was helping to tell the whole kind of story of Intel that year, really building an ecosystem of chip products where we're not just powering PCs anymore, we're powering all manner of different things. And of course, there were booth staff who were delivering the narrative as well. This was the first time ever we've done a project like this where we didn't have to push text marketing messages or product images, which was kind of nice. And of course, you can see products there in the foreground. So we found that over 4 days, we had, I think, 30,000 individual creatures created. And that means 30,000 people actually got hands on this thing. And in terms of human throughput, that was big for us. And so another thing to keep in mind if you are ever interested in doing these kinds of installations, human throughput is a huge issue. So another benefit for having really short, really casual interactions is that you get more people using it over time, and that can be an actual success metric written in your requirements. So there's a lot of other examples, of course, of casual interactions. One example that I just love is the fact that my ATM statistically knows how much money I take out every time and just gives me this option to say, oh, do you want that X number of dollars again? And I'm like, yes. And it just takes my interaction, including my PIN, from 11 button presses down to 6. I mean, you're only shaving off a few seconds here, but it seems that my bank is listening to me, and that goes a long way. Conversely, something that should be more casual and effortless than it really is are these stupid things. And I think that the problem here is that if I shop at Safeway every week, I'm an expert user, and there's no benefit to me being an expert user with this system. So I put the bananas on the scale. I know from heart that's code 4011, and I can't physically move fast enough to not have the voice kick in saying, please enter the drives me crazy. And it's just, and it feels like there's absolutely this wall between myself and the brand, myself and this whole kind of soulless enterprise, Home Depot. The Nest thermostat is the opposite. And the thermostats are so interesting because almost always they're in transitional areas of the home. They're usually in hallways or corridors. And so the whole idea is, oh, it's too warm, and you keep walking. And it can, of course, learn over time. And so over time, even those interactions start to kind of trail off in an interesting way. Very, very powerful. We take a lot of inspiration also from the world of digital art installations. And one of the most stunning ones that I've come across was originally put in at the Barbican in London, and it recently was in New York City, called the Rain Room. Has anyone actually experienced the Rain Room? So a couple people, great. So the whole idea is it is a room inside a building where it is always raining, and you can move through it in any way and never get wet. And so talk about a casual interaction. The only input it requires from you is to simply be there and walk through the space. Of course, there are microcontrollers hooked up to rain emitters, and they're all driven by depth sensing cameras, and they're tracking your body so that it turns off the rain emitters where you're standing. If you looked at this on a spec, it would be like, okay, yeah, all doable, makes sense. But the experience is just utterly magical, and all that technology is completely hidden from the visitor. This is a piece called Fracture, where the only input you need is just to stand in front of a camera, and it captures your body, and it creates a piece of generative 3D art based on your contour in that moment. So it takes literally a fraction of a second to create something utterly, utterly unique. The next project, many of you probably have seen online and have maybe saw at the Interaction Design Awards in Dublin this year, but 21 Swings is this beautiful, beautiful installation where it looks like a swing set that's musically augmented, and really it's a musical instrument whose interface is a swing set. And this is an interesting example because, of course, all you need to do is plunk your butt down and start swinging, and music starts to be created. But the more people you have swinging with you, the more people that you have swinging in unison or in opposition, the harder you swing. Those are all inputs into how the music comes together. Really, really beautiful. Just last week, Wired ran this article about the My Magic Plus, I'm not sure about the branding on that one, the My Magic Plus bracelet that is RFID based, and it brings this whole system or this whole set of capabilities to people. And it basically gives you superpowers at Disney World, where you can get faster access to rides, you can do purchasing, all sorts of really, really interesting things. And I think that this is an example where you set it up beforehand, online, you get the bracelet, and from there it's a fairly kind of no screen kind of interaction. But these kind of interactions don't have to be high tech at all. Coca-Cola had these happiness trucks with a gigantic button on the back, and you press it, and it just gave you something to make you happy based on where you were. Unbelievably simple. Some people got Cokes, but this thing dispensed surfboards, soccer balls, sandwiches, pizzas, and the best thing about it is you hit that button, and there's some guy's hairy arm handing you this thing. Like, there's no obfuscation of the fact that there is no technology involved at all. And the fact that you see some guy's arm handing you a slice of pizza, that makes you smile. That's the point. That is the brand. And it is short and, sorry, pun intended, very sweet. So let's talk about some principles then to start to think about the nature of casual interactions in your work. Obviously, it's very important to express the brand of your product, service, or project. And a brilliant example that we saw recently was, this is done by Hush out of New York. And they had this system where users were given a Sumi brush, and they were asked to just make a form that expresses themselves. And their digital system would basically map that form to the outline of a car that most closely in some way approximated that form. So really kind of at every point kind of making sure there's no room for failure, and really reinforcing that, Infinity as a brand extends me. And that was the extent of it. And it was very premium, really beautiful piece. We have a principle that we call garbage in, garbage out. And on this project, we actually had one of our clients worry someone was going to cut out an AMD logo out of cardboard and put that in the machine. And so we actually put that into our test plan. We did that, and we showed them what it looked like. And it didn't look like anything. So we wanted to make sure that no matter how flippant or how sarcastic or even just how genuine but momentary or furtive someone's input is, something beautiful always came out. And this is a great way to really act as a force multiplier for people's curiosity and their imagination. And it also helps you be a little bit more failure-proof. So one of the things to think about is how people think about failure. When you're a child, failure is part of exploring your world. You fail at things all the time. That's how you get better. When you're an adult, you get this kind of shame reaction. And it's funny how people are much more comfortable failing around people they know as opposed to complete strangers. So on the floor of CES, for example, failure for a user is not an option in any way. And this also kind of gets into an issue that we deal with in terms of how do you design, what are your experiential design targets? And a lot of people talk about designing for the lowest common denominator. I think that's pretty insulting for most of our users, frankly. And we instead don't talk about the lowest common denominator. We talk about how can we exceed people's lowest common expectation, given that people are informed as much in terms of what they think a future-looking interface design might be, they're as influenced by science fiction films as they are from anything coming out of our industry or Silicon Valley. And you have to manage that expectation. Anytime someone touches something, even if it's the wrong thing, give them something beautiful. And dealing with user expectations, we all know how expectation works. And I think that it's really important to make sure that every time you create an experience, to always look for how can you exceed their expectations. Even if their expectations are, I press this, I'll probably get something like this, how that something appears is really critical. Another great way to disarm people's expectations is to really screw with your delivery hardware and mess with how people are going to expect data to come to them. The little printer by Berg London is great. They've kind of recontextualized ultra-low-end, very commercial thermal printing into something that'll give you this digital information feed throughout the day, which is very cute. Something as simple as just dealing with unusual form factors. If you are going to do a screen-based interaction, make it long. Take your screen and just make it portrait-oriented, for crying out loud. These little things will start to pull the connotations of, oh, this is going to feel like work, or oh, this is going to feel like play, and really give you more room to groove experientially. This is the hotel lobby in the Cosmopolitan in Las Vegas, and it looks like this huge, massive series of moving tiles, when in reality there's 16 by 9 screens stacked up to the ceiling, and then there's a mirror. But the overall first glance experience is just amazing. We've had great experiences also in dealing with clients creating this stuff for events, especially, or installations where you can't actually do full testing until you're in the space, and oh, by the way, now you have 2 days before the whole space opens to the general public. And that's parameterizing everything. Make everything an editable parameter. So that means, it can be an XML, that's fine. We prefer to even have little pop-up panels that we can control and change colors on set, on the fly. And we often build little touch OSC applications on iOS, so we can stand at the front of house on an iPad and then dial things in, because the lighting's always going to be different than what you had in your shop. You might also imagine that in a world where you're trying to go short, you're trying to go shallow, all the details are like under microscopes. Everything's massively magnified, which is surely why all of you are going to the Microactions workshop tomorrow. This is just the Bible on how this stuff comes together, and I don't have time to get into it today, but really realizing that, wow, if I'm going to really put my money where my mouth is and the experience is only this long, every detail has to absolutely be perfect. Metrics are also tough. How do you track unique sessions on a touch screen has been a big, big issue. But now, as we were talking about with the balkanization of computing platforms, now you can use pressure sensors or proximity sensors or 3D cameras. And that stuff might not power the output for the end user at all, but the system knows what's happening. So you can actually use that to generate real usage metrics, which is great for clients trying to justify ROI. This space also lets you really collaborate outside of your usual partners, where you can start working with architects and fabricators and injection molders. Incredibly exciting, and it really gets you out of your comfort zone, which is important in doing this kind of work. And also, if you are pressed to make the experience shareable, it's your job to make it share-worthy. And if you are forced to put a like or share button on it, I think you have probably failed by that point. The final thought is, or a final thought is also, where do you find inspiration for this stuff? Because there's a lot of examples, obviously from art and online, but the mainstream isn't really supporting this kind of experience yet, and so you have to watch the margins. And you should look at the world of art installations. You should read more about modern architecture and theories of place. There are so many areas outside of our immediate realm of user experience design that can be just incredibly valuable in terms of inspiring casual interaction design. So if your project and its users might benefit from casual interactions, streamlining every interaction really shows that you're respecting the user's time. This has clear cognitive, emotional, and brand benefits. You can do this by enforcing concision ruthlessly in every interaction, and really be focused in what your application does. Do one thing, but do it absolutely better than anyone else ever has before. And create experiences that are accessible with just a little curiosity, but pay off in huge ways. And hopefully some combinations of all of these factors is going to do more than capture the user's attention. It'll capture their interest and their confidence, which in turn should, hopefully, inspire loyalty and emotional connections to brands. Hopefully, and quite literally in no time at all. Thank you.